So there's a poll out there that shows the coalition leading 55 to 45. Would you now describe yourself as the front runner in this election?
Well, we remain the underdog in this election because a first-term opposition hasn't won since 1931. Now, this is the worst government since 1931, and Anthony Albanese is the worst Prime Minister since 1931 and completely out of his depth. I think we should be very honest about that, and I think the Australian public has understood that, particularly since The Voice. They wasted $450 million and were distracted for the first half of this term, which means they weren't making the decisions that they needed to make to help rein in inflation. And inflation's just got away under this government, which is why interest rates have stayed higher for longer. Bulk billing rates have come down under this government by 11%. When I was Health Minister, bulk billing rates were 84%, and they're now at 77%. Everything this Prime Minister touches turns to disaster. But the polling at the moment will come and go, and there'll be different polls. The poll that matters, obviously, is on election day, and that will be an opportunity to vote out a bad government and to make sure that our government is not returned in a form where the Greens are calling the shots, which is the only way that Mr Albanese can form a government after the next election, which would be a disaster for the economy, a disaster for small business and a disaster for families.
Are you ready to go if an election's called this Sunday?
Well, look, I think what's important is that the Prime Minister should go back to Parliament as it's scheduled to in a couple of weeks, so that we can pass legislation to guarantee this funding in relation to Medicare, and also to make sure that the salmon industry in Tasmania can be taken care of. If the Prime Minister is cutting and running from a budget because he's got no good news to tell, then I think why would people vote for him? If the economy's so good and people have never had it better, why doesn't the government go to a budget? Why is the Prime Minister cutting and running from the budget which is scheduled on the 25th of March? I'll tell you why, because this government is a disaster. They have racked up an enormous amount of debt. They have hurt families, not helped them. 27,000 small businesses have closed. Electricity prices are through the roof. People can't buy a house, they can't afford their homes. And this Prime Minister doesn't want to go to a budget, and that's why he's cutting and running. But Parliament is scheduled to sit, and we should sit that week so that we can pass the legislation to guarantee this funding and also to provide that support to the salmon industry in Tasmania, because the salmon industry in Tasmania is being abandoned by this Prime Minister who is chasing green votes in Sydney, in inner city Sydney and Melbourne. It's exactly why he's abandoned WA as well, because he's chasing Greens votes. And if there is an Albanese-backed government after the election, things will only get much harder for Australians and much harder for our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you.